Welcome to Canceled Out, where the only size that matters is the amount of your heart that you use to love the Constitution. I'm Scott, the bald and bearded one, joined by my co-host,
Maximum!
well, the other one. We've got a lot to cover today, but I'm going to forewarn you, it's going to be a longer episode. There's a lot to discuss about what's going on in our country today. But we need your help. We need you to like, subscribe, share, download, comment, 5-star review, or whatever our podcast on all of our platforms. Help us get the word out about what we're talking about, what's going on. Today we're going to talk about Biden giving his first press conference after 64 days in office. And the Boulder, Colorado King super shooting. We're going to talk about the story, the narrative, and the way forward, potentially, as far as the lawmakers are concerned. In local news, we're going to talk about former Addison police chief flirting with heading to the clink. Dora at the banks. Ohio legislators finally reading the Constitution to stand up to Dictator DeWine. A Westchester trustee going shirtless at a meeting. The city council of Cincinnati proves their bigotry toward businesses. And a taxpayer mural gets a refresh downtown. In our bonehead of the week, you won't believe who it is. The culture philosophical discussions today are going to once again revolve around whether or not the debate with the left is over. This is going to be part 2 of a 3-part series, so join us again next week for the conclusion. But as far as anything else is concerned, let's go. All right, time for some announcements. So, Joe Blystone is a new candidate for governor. He's coming to speak to the Eastside Republican Club. Mark your calendars, April 27th at 7 p.m. at the Patriots Center on Clough Pike. So you have to do a few things to be able to get in. Go to their Facebook page. Respond to the post with a yes, talking about him being there. They need numbers for the location. So
you got to go to the Blystone for Governor.
I'm sorry. No,
Facebook page.
Go to the Eastside Republican Club Facebook page.
Well, I'll tell you. I think I don't think it's a page. I think it's a private group.
Ooh, go join the group.
Yeah. So
hey, how about that? Yeah. You're right. Actually, you're right.
Yeah.
Go to their group, join the group, and then put a yes on the post. Joe also put out a post on his Facebook page. It is a page, I know that. Saying that he'll be there, so you can go and mark yourself on that too. It might be the ESRC might be looking at that too. Mm-hmm. So I would imagine so. His Facebook page is Blystone for Governor of Ohio. That whole phrase. So if you just type in Joe Blystone, I'm sure you can find him. He's a big Santa Claus looking guy with a cowboy hat. So he should be very interesting to listen to.
It'd be cool to have a guy. I mean, I don't know how much of a chance this guy
right
has, but it'd be cool to have a governor that's like a good old boy like that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
He's
that's
definitely
just
unlike anybody.
Yeah.
So
the longest beard since
right since the Civil War.
Yeah.
Also, Canceled Out is now on YouTube, so that's pretty awesome.
Doesn't mean there's any video of us. Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. No, it's just our cover art. So, but you get the audio, you get all the previous episodes, and you get the cool thing about YouTube is that it allows you to timestamp and link to that, so you'll be able to timestamp and listen to the individual segments.
Especially if you just want to focus on like the local stuff that we discuss.
Yeah, for sure.
Although I suggest you listen to the whole thing, but that's just
for sure,
opinion.
Right? I mean, to get the entire experience, you want to listen to the whole thing.
Maybe one day we'll do video too, but
right.
Who knows if anybody actually wants to see our face.
Oh, man, it's bad enough seeing my own face every day, much less other people. But you also get links to our show notes and materials and everything else too, which is going to be extremely important with this episode in particular. I linked a crap ton of stuff.
Yeah, I saw that.
To the show notes because a lot of the stuff that we'll be talking about, it needs to be sourced, and so out of transparency, you want to do that. So we're on YouTube. Check out the Canceled Out channel. Links will be provided on our social media. So, and also, speaking about social media, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe us on our Facebook page and Instagram page.
Do it. Like, follow, subscribe, do it.
And also, did you want to do the next
Oh,
one?
yeah, that's right. I guess I got to do this one.
I mean, you don't have to.
So speaking of show notes, we do use Chronicles for our show notes. And for those of you who don't know, Chronicles represents the next evolution not only of how we consume information, but how we understand it. It is the memory of our world, the website of record, and it's an offering of clarity in an otherwise chaotic digital environment. Please visit chronicles.org. That's spelled CHRONIKLES.org, and make sure you sign up, follow some timelines, create some timelines, add some content. Chronicles is effectively a reference site similar to Wikipedia, but much, much better, and it's in a timeline format in more digestible, bite-sized pieces. So please do check that out.
That's how we source all of our information on the show. And so be sure to get in there, get involved, and check us out. If you'd like to become a sponsor, featured on one of our episodes, reach out to us at canceledOutpodcast@gmail.com. Canceled is spelled CANCELED. It's the American spelling, not the British spelling. So no double L's in there. But anyway, let's get started. So we got a lot in the quickie section here because a lot happened this week, but we really want to get to the main crux of the issue of things that are going on this past week. So let's go. According to Fox News, Biden is to push another coronavirus recovery bill, this time covering infrastructure that has been neglected this past year. So on top of a $1.9 trillion package that he just passed last week or the week before. Details of that are going to come out this coming Wednesday. Dr. Fauci believes that COVID-19 had time to adapt in the wild in the early days. This expert theory comes from the criticism that the virus escaped from a lab in Wuhan, China, and all this other kind of stuff. And everybody's just trying to fill in the gaps where we just don't know exactly what happened. Or at least we're not reporting exactly what happened.
I mean, I think there's enough evidence out there to be very, very suspicious that this didn't come from a lab in Wuhan. That's just me. Call me a conspiracy theorist, but there's a lot of suspicious stuff, especially with how much they tried to cover things up.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, and we know they did. And there is a timeline on Chronicles that you can check out called Chinese Business is Shady Business. And there's all kinds of records on there about how China lied, how they covered things up, how the WHO covered things up for them. And we actually just learned recently, we didn't put this, I might add this in the show notes later. But we just learned recently that Judicial Watch, I think, found some emails through the Freedom of Information Act that showed that the National Institute of Health, which, as I understand it, Dr. Fauci runs, they had emails where the WHO was asking, I think it was the WHO, was asking officials from the NIH, from the National Institute of Health, not to release or publish or share any information about what they find regarding the coronavirus. This was back in February of last year.
Yeah.
Not to publish or share any of that information about what they find until China says it's okay.
Huh.
That's not suspicious at all, right?
Right.
And I mean, okay. So
actually, I think Fauci runs the NIA. National Institute of Infectious Diseases and something like that. But check us out. It's either the NIH or the NIA.
I'll put the information in the show notes, and y'all can look it up. But I'm just telling you, don't believe these freaking experts.
Right.
As soon as somebody says experts say, you can pretty much just put on your criticism cap.
Right. The George Floyd trial begins. I don't know why I put that in the notes. A shooter. That's not a shooting trial. George Floyd trial begins today on Monday, the 29th.
Oh, yeah. Chauvin, is that his name?
Yeah.
I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to that.
There's not really been a whole lot on it. No. They're just doing opening statements today. I watched a little bit of it. It's actually publicly televised right now.
Is it?
Yeah, so I've been watching some of the coverage today. But Minneapolis is bracing for riots due to the happenings of the trial, the potential outcomes of the trial. Even 10 months after this incident happened. President Biden, according to Fox News, his staffer blocked Ted Cruz from taking videos of the migrant facility in Donna, Texas when they were down there. I saw the video of that today.
Really?
It was, she literally is her face is the full view of his cell phone camera. And she's that close talking to him, asking, please don't use these people as political props, essentially. But it's like,
oh, really?
Yeah, how ironic that she would say that from the Biden administration.
Right. What about social distancing? Like, how close was she to be able to get into that?
Well, but she's wearing a
full screen view.
She's wearing a mask. Yeah. So here's an interesting stat with the Donna, Texas facility. So it's it's built to house 1,000 people. Currently, and with the COVID policies, the capacity has been downgraded to 250 people, and now it is currently at 4,000 plus.
Built for 1,000, reduced to 250 due to COVID, but is currently housing 4,000 people.
Yeah, plus. Actually, more. Yeah, it's like 4,200 people. So it's at 1,500% capacity. So the government can't even follow its own policies.
Well, no, of course not.
I mean, so there we go again. According to the Daily Wire, another Biden official, or potentially the same one, I have no idea because they were never named, urged Republican Senator Mike Braun of Indiana to delete the photos that he took of the crowded border facility down there in Donna, Texas. And he responded by saying that if they were going to be muzzled, they would never even made the trip down. So he obviously refused to do that.
Good.
And which is great. Yeah, those pictures have been released to the media and are all over the place now. And
I think we'll get into this, but didn't they ask him Biden if he was going to pledge to be transparent about everything that's going on?
Oh yeah,
there? Because
so
far I'm not seeing transparency.
Right.
But whatever.
Right. Actually, that was a major thing that they pressed him on in his press conference, which was a disaster. We'll talk a little bit about that. Let's see. Georgia. Okay, here's a big story right now that is being completely gaslit. The American public's being completely gaslit on this story. The Georgia Election Integrity Act. And you hear the narrative that, voters should be allowed to drink water. That's the big narrative coming out of this.
What does that mean? I don't understand.
So the bill in it has this is where they get that narrative out of this wording. It says, no person shall solicit votes in any manner or by any means or method, nor shall any person distribute or display any campaign material, nor shall any person give, offer to give, or participate in the giving of any money or gifts, including but not limited to food and drink, to an elector. So basically, this is saying you're not allowed to solicit votes by using food or drink or money or anything else. So basically, you're not allowed to buy votes. You're not allowed to bribe people to vote for your candidate because you're the people out there giving them drinking water. So it's not that these voters cannot drink or eat or anything. It's just that campaigns and people who work for, or people who want a certain outcome cannot work in the voting lines to give people stuff to try to bribe them for their votes.
I don't see that here in this quote here, and this is just from what you quoted here, but it just says
they shall not solicit votes. So that's what that would mean. That's the legalese from my understanding behind all of that.
I'm just playing devil's advocate
here,
yeah. But it says shall not solicit votes, and then down further, I'm going to skip a couple lines here. It says, nor shall a person give or offer to give gifts not limited to food, drink, which are two separate statements, it seems to me. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that the wording doesn't sound like you shall not bribe people with water. It says you shall not even give them any water. Maybe I'm being picky. I'm not trying to, but just for the sake of making sure we're clear and we're right.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that's the exact wording of the bill. Mm-hmm. I mean, could it be clearer? Of course, because this is all the whatever. If you've ever read a bill, they're a joke.
But you know what? Bring your own damn water. You want to vote? Go.
Right. And most people do anyway. I've never encountered. I've voted in several elections at this point. I've never encountered a situation where I was standing in line and like, man, I really wish I had water or something like that, and didn't have it, and then just this situation I've never encountered in my life and never even had the thought, because I guess I'm one of those people that if I know I'm going to be potentially standing in a line, I'm going to bring something to eat or drink with me. I mean, this last election, I had a big cup of coffee and I stood out in line in the rain, no less, for 2 hours just to vote this last election. So it was like,
well, and in all honesty, I mean, I don't know the very specific reasoning for this rule, but if you ask me, you can't necessarily trust what these people are doing when they're standing right next to a potential voter with a case of water or soda or snacks or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? You're not supposed to go campaigning at these places.
Well, and
they could very well be having these conversations that people can't monitor right then and there, real close to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's really just about keeping them away, not necessarily about what they're doing as far as whether they're giving them water, any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So,
well,
I mean,
this is the big part, but then this is the big part that's being criticized, which is not what the media is reporting it as. But then Democrats have also criticized the bill as continued voter suppression because of this, in part, and then white supremacist motives for these three main points. These are the three main points that the bill covers: voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, reduction in early voting before runoffs, with runoffs held 4 weeks after the general election, which was a huge issue this last election with the election of 2 Georgia senators. Aims to address and update voter processes and disparities after the COVID-19 alterations. So basically, the bill is really about election integrity.
Yep.
And it's being overshadowed by all this other garbage.
Democrats really want to cheat.
Right.
And they hate it that people don't want them to cheat.
Right. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm a racist, you're a cheater.
Right. Yeah. Whatever that means.
Right.
Also, former President Trump is to visit the southern border in the next couple of weeks amid the Biden's border crisis, according to the Daily Wire. And he's been quoted saying they're going to destroy our country. That the administration, not the immigrants. So he also said that he wasn't trying to get down there before the president and vice president, but it may end up happening that way anyway because they don't seem to have any interest whatsoever in being.
Of course not. They don't want to draw attention to it.
Well, right, and that's what Biden said in his press conference. He said, "Well, I don't want to become the story." Well, guess what, buddy? You're the president. You're going to be the story no matter what you do. So yeah,
cop-out.
It is a cop out. It's an absolute.
You know what it reminds me of is back in 2016 before the election when that hurricane happened.
Yeah.
Was it New Orleans?
No.
Or Florida.
It was Florida.
Might have been Florida. Okay.
Because New Orleans was Bush. Katrina was Bush.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, they've had
they've
had more than one hurricane in New Orleans. But either way, it reminds me of that because that was the big criticism of Clinton at the time is she didn't end up going.
Yeah.
I think she did finally go down there, but she didn't do anything but make an appearance. I think.
Or was it Puerto Rico?
No. No, it wasn't Puerto Rico.
Because I know. Well, the big thing with the Clinton Foundation happened in Puerto Rico and all that kind of stuff. So
I'm certain it was continental U.S.
Yeah, probably.
But I just can't remember for sure. It might have been Florida. But either way, it just reminds me of that when Trump went down there and he was passing out supplies and all that kind of stuff. Well, I'm sure Hillary was getting a massage or maybe some kind of surgery.
Right. So that's the quickie, kind of quickie. But this is going to lead us, talking about the Biden administration leads us into the main, the first smaller of the two major stories going on right now in this country. So Joe Biden had his first press conference after 64 days in office.
Yeah, I'm just curious, how much of this do we got to listen to?
Not a whole lot.
I hope not.
Right. Yeah. So it's really interesting because obviously we know the media coverage of this is going to be glowing. We're never going to hear any criticism from any mainstream media source that leans anywhere close to left or anything that's not center or right. We already know that's going to happen. But this was clearly a guy who was not with it. Take a listen to this.
Be immediately available. 5,000 beds in the Texas border. So we're building back up the capacity that should have been maintained and built upon, that Trump dismantled. It's going to take time. And the other thing we're doing, I might add, am I giving you too long an answer? Because if you don't want the detail. No, but I mean, I don't know how much detail you want about
I
it.
really don't want to keep going. Don't
Maybe
make
I'll
me
stop
keep
hearing
going.
from you.
Yeah, please don't make me keep going. I don't want.
Right.
Oh, it's terrible.
His answers were rambling,
Yeah.
just incoherent rambling.
Typical Joe.
Right. And so this was like one of the first questions too. So this was early. This press conference was like an hour, a little over an hour long. And so this was one of the first questions that he got, and it was like, all right, this kind of set the tone for the rest of the discussion. And so then he gives us this gem.
Where they can be taken care of while their fate is determined. Filibuster. Filibuster.
He forgot where he was.
With regard to the filibuster, I believe we should go back to a position of the filibuster that existed just when I came to the United States Senate 120 years ago. And that is that it used to be required for the filibuster, and
How long ago?
All right, I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But is he joking on himself there, maybe? Because people do that a lot. I know he's demented. I mean, there's no doubt that he's got dementia.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a doctor, but it's pretty clear he's got mental problems, one way or the other.
Though, because
But that's the problem, is that you don't know.
He says it so deadpan,
Yeah.
and
But every time he jokes, like every time he tries to joke, the Jim Crow, Jim Eagle joke that he tried to do didn't land. You didn't hear that one?
Oh yeah. That was part of this conference.
Every time he tries to joke, it never lands. So it's hard to know for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. But you didn't even hear like anybody in the room laugh when that happened either.
Because his jokes never land. Even if it was a joke, they never land. But maybe it wasn't a joke, and that's the thing. You don't know.
I don't. Yeah.
With Joe, it could be that he really doesn't know the math.
Right. Well, it's funny that you say that.
This is our president, ladies and gentlemen.
Right. So here,
totally elected on non-fraudulent terms.
Right.
Wait, not.
He's completely with it, people.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go again.
I'm going to say something outrageous. I have never been particularly poor at calculating how to get things done in the United States Senate. So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to. Anyway.
Wow.
We're going to get a lot done.
Yeah. So
Man, he got tired there.
Right.
He got really tired.
Yeah. He got sleepy.
He got really sleepy right there.
Right.
He really did.
Oh
Wow.
man, this permeated the entire thing. Every time he would switch questioning to a different reporter, he was using these note cards. If you didn't see it, and I highly encourage you to see.
I think I saw
go
a
watch
picture
the
of it,
video.
and they even had pictures on
Yes,
the
pictures
note cards.
and names of the reporters, which doesn't really do you any good when their faces are covered with masks either.
Well, sure.
But I mean, everything, all of this was orchestrated as much as possible, and Joe couldn't even keep with it.
No wonder he waited 64 days.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then I don't know if this was like an episode or what, but then he just started yelling at everybody.
I'm concerned. Look, I meant what I said when I ran, and a lot of you still think I'm wrong, and I respect that. I said I'm running for 3 reasons: to restore the soul, dignity, honor, honesty, transparency to the American political system.
Buzzwords.
Yep.
2, to rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class.
Trump already did that.
Right.
Thanks anyway, though.
Hardworking people and people struggling to get in the middle class. They built America, and unions built them.
Just started yelling at people. I don't know what that was.
Unions built who? The people who are looking for
The
jobs?
middle class is
Okay,
is what he's
whatever.
saying. But the way that he you just hear his voice just echo in the room in the clip. Even it's just like, what the world? Like, what is happening right now?
It's weird, like how it's crazy how in the one where he lost himself in the middle of the sentence. Like at first, it sounded like he was very enthusiastic about
Right.
what he was about to say,
Right.
and then he just lost it.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like, how does that happen?
Well,
I mean, unless you have dementia.
I mean, yeah,
Right.
mental,
Okay,
it's mental incapacity, something like that. Not with us. And then
for sure.
I did like this though, because this was a pretty good I guess as close to a mic drop moment as Joe Biden's going to get. And so it was funny to me anyway.
I may ask one last question. Have you had any talks with Senate Republicans who are threatening this administration with not considering the immigration legislation that was passed in the House until the situation at the border has been resolved?
No, because I know they have to posture for a while. They sort of got to get it out of their system. This is but I'm ready to work with any Republican who wants to help solve the problem or make the situation
Every
better.
word sounds labor.
But folks, I'm going.
I'm going. Biden out.
Oh, yeah. He's like, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. Wow. Every word he says sounds labored. He's like,
Yeah.
I gotta say another word.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna say, come together.
Just for us.
And, you know what it reminds me of? This is terrible. You ever seen Malcolm in the Middle?
Oh, yeah.
You remember Stevie?
Yeah.
And he had to breathe through every word.
I haven't thought about that show.
I just got done binging it, so that's why it's fresh in my mind.
That's
but
hilarious.
I just got done binging that on Hulu. That's what it reminds. Seriously.
Right.
Someone's got to make that meme.
Right.
Someone's got to do the mashup of Stevie from Malcolm in the Middle with Joe Biden. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll put my meme
we might have to be
tactics to work there.
Oh, man.
That's terrible. I'm the worst type of person.
No. But see, the thing of it is, like, I feel awful because, like I've said in another episode, like, I have family members who have dealt with I've seen this firsthand. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we didn't put that person out in public for this to happen. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're going to be if you're going to hold a public office, you're going to open yourself to public criticism. And so I don't blame Joe necessarily. I blame the people around him for this debacle. Like, this is just bad.
Well, I mean, you've got your finger over the nuclear button, and
Right.
Now that's always one of those things that people say that's just an extreme thing to say,
Right,
because
right,
when was the
right.
last time we used it, right?
Right.
But still, the point is you make a lot of very important decisions
Absolutely.
for a lot of people. And if
In
you're going to be
theory.
right,
In theory.
and if you're making those kind of decisions for so many people, your mental.
Yeah.
What did he say before? Facilities. Remember when he was trying to think of the word? He couldn't think of mental faculties.
Right.
He's like, my mental facilities, right, are in question, and it's important.
Yeah.
And we're gonna laugh at you. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
You had 120 years to get this right. I don't know what to say.
Right. I mean, oh man, and so he had this narrative throughout at least half of this press conference that the Republican voters agree with what he's doing. So just being transparent, I have no idea where this came from. I cannot find it anywhere. This idea that Republican voters agree with Joe Biden on near anything. So I don't know. Like, he kept pushing this. I don't know where it's coming from. I haven't even found it in a news article. Not to say that it's not out there, but this is something that I can't even find answers for. So,
I don't.
I mean, we're just here for Joe Biden's entertainment.
Yeah, Joe Biden is there for our entertainment. If he's going to do nothing else, he better entertain me. But sometimes he just makes me sad.
Really,
he just
ultimately,
makes
at
me
the end of the day,
I want to be entertained.
Yeah.
But
right. All right. So now that we've had our fun with Biden,
I'm sorry, guys. That was as fun as we could make it. It's Joe Biden.
Right. I mean,
there's only so much we can do to make that fun.
Yeah. It's bad.
I feel kind of deflated right now.
There wasn't a whole lot that came out of that whole news conference. That
would be a really good time for an advertisement, just to give us a break from that crap.
Sign up for Chronicles.
Come on now, get up here and start buying some ad space, y'all.
Right,
for all 17 of our listeners.
Right. There's been 24 unique downloads.
Hell yeah, we're rocking it.
Right. So the big takeaways from this conference essentially are there were no questions on the corona pandemic, quote unquote pandemic, and then Chuck Todd, said, well, that's because Corona's doing well. Then why do they keep fear mongering the public? So that's the question, the follow up question to that. But you'll never hear that.
Why did they go after Ted Cruz for not wearing a mask, even though he's been vaccinated and he was in the middle of giving a press conference, similar to what Joe Biden just did without a mask, and nobody called him on it. But whatever.
Right. And then also there were no questions from Fox News, which at this point is the only kind of opposing mainstream media source.
Right. If you can even count them.
Right. Yeah. And I say that pretty loosely, especially with their behavior in the last several months. So that's the only uplifting thing that we have for the time being in national news. If we can call it that. So, again, hate reporting this and hate covering these things. Once again, and I hate even thinking that, a lot of these incidents tend to come in threes. But there was another mass shooting, quote-unquote mass shooting, because that means different things to different sources, in Boulder, Colorado at the King Soopers grocery store. So we'll get through these facts real quick, and then we can start talking about the larger narrative. So the shooting occurred at King Soopers grocery in the early afternoon. The police were dispatched at 2:40 p.m. in the afternoon. 2 victims were seen laying face down outside the store. The rest were inside. There was not really any indication that those people were breathing from witnesses. You're hearing a lot about Officer Eric Talley, obviously, because of his position. He was a police officer who unfortunately was killed during this incident. He's a 10-year-old police veteran, father of 7 children, ages 5 to 18.
10-year veteran. He wasn't 10 years old.
Yeah. 10-year police veteran and father of 7
Sorry,
children.
I got to bring a little bit of levity here,
Right.
Otherwise I'll just lose my freaking mind.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure I just heard you say that he was 10 years old, but whatever.
Well, whatever. 10-year police veteran and father of 7 children, ages 5 to 18. So condolences to his family.
That's terrible.
That's awful.
7 children.
Yeah.
He was busy, wasn't he?
Right. He was taking care of business. And apparently this was not even his first career. He had a career going into it. He joined the police force late in life. And so this was a second career. He felt a higher calling according to colleagues or the DA or somebody who made that comment. But all 10 victims deserve to be recognized. So here we'll go name them. Denny Strong, 20 years old. Nevin Stanzik, 23 years old. Ricky Olds, 25 years old. Trelona Bartkowiak, 49 years old.
Is that Russian?
Yeah, something. Suzanne Fountain, 59 years old. Terry Laker, 51 years old. And Boulder Police Officer Eric Talley, 51 years old. Kevin Mahoney, 61 years old. Lynn Murray, 62 years old. Jody Walters, 65 years old. So our condolences go out to those families because this is just an awful, senseless, evil crime that was committed. So the shooter was a 21-year-old Syrian man from Arvada, Colorado, which is a Denver suburb.
Wait, hold on a second. I thought he was a white guy.
Well, he looks... I mean, to be fair, if you look at him, he kind of looks like a white guy. But if you take a closer look at his features, you can tell he's definitely not a white guy. He's definitely of an Arab descent.
But I think it's funny how, of course, the left shifted the goalpost on this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they started off by talking. Like, remember, I think you'll get into her. The chick that.
Yeah.
Will you get into her?
I think.
Okay.
Yeah. If not, then we'll bring it up.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say it real quick. Basically, she had said, and maybe we'll add this in the show notes if it's not already there. But she was a reporter who talked about how white people get angry and do this kind of stuff. Yeah. It's always a white man or something to that effect, right? And I think she got fired for it.
There's a lot of people.
Right. But then we find out that the guy is Syrian.
Right.
And they go, oh, well, yeah, but he looks white, and that's why he was treated more fairly. I was like, well, hold on a second. That was not how it was a second ago when you were talking about how it's always a certain type of people. It wasn't.
Right.
That was not a truth fact.
Right.
It was a freaking lie is what it was.
Right.
And now you're claiming that what we're really talking about is whether or not he gets treated fairly, and it's because he looks white that he was treated fairly. Give me a freaking break.
Right. Oh, no, absolutely. And that was the main narrative when all this was still happening in real time was, this white the white angry males and stuff like this. Well, a lot of these people ate their words, deleted their tweets and everything in media, and in people who had large followings.
Archive everything.
Right. So, yeah, that was the main narrative going through this. But he was born in Syria in 1999, immigrated to the U.S. as a toddler, later became a U.S. citizen, and this is why he could buy a gun legally. And so
I saw this brought up on another podcast that I was listening to actually earlier today. Mm-hmm. But they were like, this guy does not look like he's 21 years old.
He really didn't.
He looks like he could be in his... And I went and looked up the picture, and he does look like he's easily in his 30s.
Yeah.
He looks older than me.
He does. Yeah. I agree.
Is he one of those guys that came over and lied about his age? You know, the whole...
I don't know.
I mean, I'm throwing it out there. Who knows?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. And
I know. You know it happens.
Oh, absolutely.
So when you see a guy like this who supposedly is 21 years old... But he looks like, and they always do. They always look like they're 10, 15 years older than they claim.
That kind of begs the question of, what kind of documentation does Syria keep? This goes back even to the quote unquote Muslim ban and everything else that President Trump put into place, and it was because these countries, these Muslim nations over there, and it wasn't all Muslim nations either, but they don't keep birth records and they don't keep vital records on their people, so therefore they shouldn't be allowed in necessarily unless we can identify who these people are for this kind of reason. We can't save everybody.
I don't know what to tell you.
Right. And so I don't know if he would fit into that category because he immigrated here as a toddler. So basically he grew up as an American according to any reports that I've seen. Basically grew up as an American kid. And then he even became a citizen. So I don't know if he fits into that category or not. He very easily could, I guess. But I don't know. So he was charged for this with 10 counts of first-degree murder and held without bail. So he's facing quite a bit of time. A motive hasn't been established. He also suffered a bullet wound by police to the leg. And you can see that in the arrest pictures and video or whatever. That same video that all these people claim that he was a white man. He's previously known to the FBI after being linked to another individual who was under investigation. So that was kind of interesting that the FBI was even keeping tabs on this guy. And this still kind of happened, which, again, this is not the first time this has happened with the FBI knowing of somebody and them becoming a violent criminal. Let's see. Law enforcement. Okay, so here's some interesting background on him. Law enforcement and former wrestling teammate have described the shooter as someone prone to sudden rage. He once lost a wrestling match in practice once, and he yelled that he would kill everyone. Mm-hmm. And his coach kicked him off the team for that. An incident in 2018, his supposed senior year in high school, found him guilty of assaulting a fellow student in class after he had made fun of him, the shooter, and called him racist names, supposedly. He was suspended from school, sentenced to probation, and community service for that. And then the shooter's family told police that they believed he had been suffering from some sort of mental illness, including delusions. His relatives described times when the guy told him that people were following or chasing him. And a woman identified as his sister-in-law told police that she took a gun that looked like a quote-unquote machine gun away from him 2 days before the shooting. So clearly this guy has some history of
Isn't this the kind of stuff that should show up in a background check?
Yeah.
Did he pass the background check?
Well, he had to pass the background check.
I guess
Colorado's got some of the strictest gun laws in the country.
Well, I didn't know where he bought it from.
It was in Colorado.
No, but like from a store or from a...
Well, from everything that I've seen, it was bought locally.
So it was bought legally, and the background check didn't do anything to stop it.
Yes, and Colorado has red flag laws. Mm-hmm. They have all of these things in place to supposedly stop something like this from happening.
So the family and then the sister-in-law, these people could have implemented the red flag laws to stop this from happening, and that didn't happen either.
You're right. Right. So, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of failures in supposed law that took place to allow this to even happen. And on top of everything, the FBI kind of had tabs on him. So, but he bought a Ruger AR.
All we need is one more law.
I know.
One more law, and we'll stop all of these mass shootings.
If we could just save one person's life.
Yeah, I mean,
I say that with just because obviously
we can't even keep prisoners from shanking each other.
Right.
But we're supposed to keep guns. We're supposed to pass one more law to keep guns off the streets.
Well, not even off the streets, out of the hands of criminals who don't recognize the law in the first place, which is the just complete idiocy of all of this.
Right.
So he used a Ruger AR-556, which I looked this up, and it's actually a pretty nice gun.
I know, I looked it up too.
And it reminded me a lot of our just a smaller M16 that we used in the military. But it resembles an AR-15 with a slightly shorter stock. And he bought it on March 16th, 6 days before the shooting. And originally this gun was reported to be an AR-15. It is not. So don't fall into that narrative either.
Another reason why, I mean, this is all new information for the most part to me. I mean, some of this stuff I'd heard sporadically, but this is another reason why I, like, whenever a shooting happens, I basically ignore the story for as long as I possibly can, because I just know that the shit that I'm going to hear is probably wrong.
Right. Well, and two, at this point, we're almost a week out. They still don't even know why he did this in the first place.
Yeah. It still isn't, and they have him in custody and they still don't know.
Right.
So,
Right.
Or at least we don't.
Well, yeah, exactly. And so, this is why I understand that news media has to report the news, but there's been there's always so much irresponsible reporting.
Because it's all about racing to get the information out there, whoever gets the information out there first. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's accurate. It's just...
Right.
Which is what happened to Richard Jewell.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you guys don't know, look up Richard Jewell. There's a Chronicles timeline on him, actually.
Oh.
Richard Jewell was the security guard that found the Atlanta, Georgia bombing during the Olympics in '96, and because the media rushed to get the story out that the FBI was just considering him the way they consider everybody involved, he ended up getting thrown into the bus and his life torn apart.
Yeah.
Because the media just threw him under the bus like he was a suspect, even though he wasn't really a suspect.
Right.
The media turned him into one.
Right.
That's effectively what happened. So.
Right. Yeah. It's.
So again, that's why whenever stuff like this happens, I'm like, I'm just gonna wait. I don't need to know right away what the details are. I can wait 6 days later to find out what we know so far.
Right.
But I don't need to know within the hour. It doesn't do me any good. I don't get any.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, my day doesn't change.
Right.
Right. I mean, if your day doesn't change either, then why are you gonna focus on it?
Right.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and so those are the facts of the story. But then that leads us to the now prevailing narrative in this country that has gotten me all kinds of just riled up this past week.
Oh yeah, I've had some words with people. That's for sure.
Yeah. So the gun control narrative, we all love it and whatever. So President Biden actually, during his press conference, he kind of admitted that the crackdown of the Second Amendment is basically all about timing and using these kinds of things like this and Sandy Hook and last week with the spa shooting and all this other kind of stuff.
Does he mean that it's time to we take advantage of when this stuff happens to introduce laws that people don't like normally?
Yes. That's exactly what I mean. That's exactly
just
what
making
he
sure.
Kind of implied.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously conservatives have been accusing Democrats of this for years, but now they just have some guy who's saying it openly in the public, and that's in the transcript, which is in the show notes too. It's amazing.
Well, and I mean, it shouldn't be surprising. I mean, remember, he wanted to bring Beto O'Rourke in to help him solve the gun issue.
He still does.
Right?
His plan is to appoint Beto at this point. From the last report, Beto's going to be the gun czar.
Yeah.
Which is frightening as could be.
Yeah, and remember, Beto said, "Hell yes, we're coming to take your guns."
Right.
So whenever any of these leftists, or in particular these supposed middle of the road guys that you and I were talking about earlier, say that nobody's trying to come and take your guns, yes, hell they are. They've said it outright. And the president is trying to appoint a gun control czar who said flat out, "Hell yes, we're coming to take your AR-15s."
Right.
So quit bullshitting me.
Right. I mean, they even trotted out Kamala Harris to say that, stop pushing the false choice. We're not coming to take your guns. Well, then why do you keep talking about putting restrictions on guns if you're not coming to take my gun?
Right, and why are you trying to collect information about what guns I have? Why are you talking about appointing Beto O'Rourke as your gun czar if you're not coming to take your guns when that's exactly what he said verbatim he wants to do?
Yeah, so here's a bill that you need to, speaking of collecting data, here's a bill that you need to keep your eyes on in Congress. It's currently H.R. 8. And this would end all legal private sales of firearms and require a background check to be done in all sales. So here's how this is planning. This is how the bill plans on working, and this is what it details it as. Say you want to give your gun to your spouse or sell your gun, quote unquote, sell your gun to your spouse. You have to turn over this weapon to somebody with a federal license. So basically your local gun shop, because they typically have them in order to sell them. You have to turn that over to them. They will then have to do a background check. And then if the background check comes back okay, then that gun can be transferred to the person you want to give it to or sell it to. This ends any inheritance or anything else just giving it over to a family member or whatever. This is the government overreaching and trying to get involved in your life way more than they need to. This also gives way to a gun registry without you even knowing it and without them actually implementing law in order to get one, because it won't be very hard for that person who's licensed to do the sale to write down serial numbers, write down information. They have to submit your information to the government.
Well, they've already got a gun registration at this point. They do. Look at it this way.
It's pretty likely.
We thought it was pretty likely that the NSA was collecting all this data on us years ago, and then it just flat out became true thanks to Edward Snowden's revelations, right?
Yeah.
So in the same way, damn well they're already collecting that information on us. They're just trying to make it easier.
Well, right.
And it's hard to collect data when it's a peer-to-peer transfer. Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And that's
what it comes down to.
Yes.
It's just about completing their registration that we already know exists.
Right. So that bill is H.R. 8, and if that wasn't enough to kind of scare you, Mazie Hirono, who is one of the worst human beings on the planet, is pushing this bill. So that should tell you enough right there. So, yeah. But if they can't do it legislatively,
they can do it executively.
They can do it executively, as Jen Psaki says.
Thanks, Jen. On the shooting in Colorado, the president said Congress must act. Senate Majority Leader Schumer has also said the Senate's poised to act. But Vice President Harris said today on CBS that she thought the change would have occurred after the Sandy Hook shootings. And I'm curious, what does the president think is different this time, and how has he changed his approach so that this administration can pass these changes when in the past it failed?
Well, first, the president shares that sentiment, as I think many Americans do, that when we saw 20 children murdered, when we saw 6 adults murdered, that would turn the tide of Congress. We have seen data and statistics still across the country still broadly support background checks. I think it's about 80% of the American public support background checks, including a good percentage of gun owners support background checks. But I think the president, who has been in public life and public office for 50 years, more than 50 years, would be the first to tell you if he were standing here that just because you don't get the policy making and the legislation done the first time, it doesn't mean you quit trying. And certainly tragedies like we saw earlier this week, like we saw last week, mass
Never let them
shootings
go to waste.
that are killing innocent lives, leaving family members without their loved ones, is a reminder of how important and vital that is. He has talked about, as he did yesterday, the importance of working with Congress. I know the vice president touched on the fact that if we want something to be permanent, if we want it to be lasting, we need it to be legislation. He certainly believes that. But there are also executive actions under consideration that we will continue working through internally. And there's lots of levers you can take, obviously, as president and vice president.
The levers of power. Mm-hmm. And this is one reason why I never wanted to see Biden as president.
Yeah.
Because he's been a gun nut since he got into Congress. and a gun grabber since he got in there.
Total side note, but I hate her voice.
Psaki, yeah.
Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah.
Look, I'm just. This is way off topic.
That's
but,
very misogynistic of you.
Yeah, but you know what? Look, that's something that you hear from some of these.
Oh, yeah.
And you hear it from men too, but you do hear it from women more, where they always go up at the end of their sentence, and da 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 da, and da 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 da, and da 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 da, and it's not authoritative, and it doesn't strike confidence whatsoever, and it's just a picky thing with me. It's a pet peeve whenever I hear anybody talk like that.
Yeah.
It's like, especially in a position of authority.
Sure.
Especially when you're trying to convince me of something.
Right.
Because you don't sound convincing when you sound like you're asking a question every single sentence.
Right.
Just saying.
Well,
that's a side note. That's neither here nor there. Call me misogynist all you want, but for crying out loud, learn how to talk
right.
with some authority.
And she's supposed to be the press secretary. Like this should be her bread and butter. This kind of stuff. But they're having such a hard time getting control of the narrative of anything. Really,
Oh, yeah.
at this point, like it started out with the border, but then this has crept into literally every issue now. Like every major issue that this administration is looking at. They have no idea what in the world they're doing. And we were sold a bill of goods by saying, oh, well, Biden's going to have the best people and people with experience and all this. Well, where have they been? What have they been doing? Because we've seen none of that, at least from my perspective, this entire time, this 64 days, because everything is slowly just turning into a pile of crap at this point. But this goes back to why I'm not a fan of executive orders in any capacity. I don't care who's president, because all this does is create instability and government overreach. Yep. And so I hate executive orders. I
didn't
hated it
agree
when Trump
with
did it.
Trump's bump stock executive order.
Well, right. Yeah, obviously. I mean, obviously. Yeah, it was awful. And
I'm glad, it looks like they just overturned that, right? I think I saw.
I didn't
I think
see
they.
that.
I think the.
Really?
Not the Ninth Circuit, obviously not the Ninth Circuit.
No,
the
they'd be
Sixth
awful.
Circuit, I think it was.
Really?
Looks like they just overturned that executive order just the other day. So
Yeah, I
check the
didn't see that.
Chronicles; it'll be on there. I'll try to add it to the show notes. But yeah,
Yeah. And so Biden loves to mention the 94 Crime Control Law Enforcement Act. You hear it as the 94 Crime Bill all the time in the media. And his part was the Public Safety and Recreational Firearms Use Protection Act. And the bill was allowed to expire in 2004 under W. Bush's administration. And this is where we kind of have gotten the prevalent narrative of assault weapons.
there's no such thing.
Right. This is a completely made up
Isn't
term.
the crime bill? Isn't it the one they always criticize Biden for because all those black people ended up in prison?
They
as a
are
result?
now. Yeah, they do now.
But now they're touting it.
Right. Well, he does. I haven't heard anybody else from the administration
After
tout
the
it.
past year or so
Right.
of them going, hey, this is the guy that put all these black people in prison
Yep.
over the 94 bill, and now he's bragging about it?
His own VP said this during the debates.
Well,
And
she
during
loved
the
putting
campaign.
black people in prison.
Well, right, but
So.
but she criticized him for
I
doing
know,
it in
but
the
that's-
bill,
it's
which
like-
is
it's rich
ironic.
coming from her is
oh,
my point, like-
absolutely, it's so crazy. So there was a study done in 2004. This study is in the show notes by a George Mason University criminology professor about Biden's beloved crime bill. It showed flat out that most crimes were committed with assault pistols.
The vast majority.
Not assault rifles.
The vast majority.
Yeah, absolutely. Why?
Which, of course, makes sense because they're
Exactly.
easier to conceal.
Exactly. Weird how that works.
Yeah.
A smaller weapon is easier to get into places where they're not supposed to
But
have
it's not
weapons.
as scary looking.
That's right, and that begs the question. They're not even addressing the supposed issue, weapon.
Mm-hmm.
They're just letting pistols go out, untouched, quote unquote, and whatever else. This is the insane part about this whole narrative that you may or may not know, depending on how involved you are in the gun issue. On top of that, so that was done in 2004 after the bill expired. In 2017, an FBI report showed the same thing, that semi-automatic rifles are statistically the least likely weapon to be used as opposed to pistols, and that's also linked in the show notes.
So all of this is in order to ban what is causing, like 3% of the mass shootings in this country?
2.5%.
2.5%.
According to
If
2019
we ban all
stats.
assault weapons, then we're going to decrease the mass murder or mass shooting rate by 2.5 points.
Yeah, basically, and that's according to 2019 stats. So that's even more
Die on
contemporary.
this hill, liberals. Die
yeah,
on this hill.
exactly.
'Cause this is the one that's going to make shit happen for you.
Well, again, this all goes back to virtue signaling and the left.
Yeah, it's right.
So 2019 statistics also linked in the show notes. Approximately 44% of all firearm murders due to using handguns. 2.5% are rifles. So then why go after the rifles? To add further perspective, this 2.5% equated to 364 murders in that year. 397 murders were done with blunt objects. 600 murders were done with personal weapons that were classified fists and feet, basically. You beat somebody to death. And 1,476 murders with knives or cutting instruments. Now, we see this playing out in Britain. If you've paid any attention to Britain in the last 10 years, you've seen this play out. You've seen them...
They don't want you to have kitchen knives.
Grab their guns. And then their police officers can't even carry a gun. And now, all of a sudden, you had... Several years ago, you had that guy...
And then you see their police officers wearing nail polish.
Well...
traded in the gun.
Right.
I'm not kidding. I saw a picture of that a while back of a British police officer wearing... Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so as soon as you get rid of their guns, that's when they start wearing the nail polish.
And you had years ago, that guy who I believe happened to be a Muslim cutting a guy's head off in the middle of the street with a machete. You saw a huge increase in crime with cutting implements and things like that. And now they're wanting to ban those, and the talk is banning all that. So
it goes back to the same argument we said about guns. About drugs. It's like, oh, you want to ban guns and then they'll go away? Tell me how that worked with drugs. It didn't. People are, just as high as they've ever been, maybe more.
Right. And so...
And they're going to extreme measures to make sure they can get high, just the way people will go to extreme measures to make sure they can still kill people.
Exactly.
I mean, the way to... We'll keep saying this till we're blue in the face, but the way to address this issue... I'm not saying we know the answers to solve the problem, but the way to address it is to make sure people have the ability to arm and defend themselves. That's what you do. Otherwise, you're just making criminals out of innocent people. That's all you're doing with these laws. Nothing more.
That's exactly it. So I was watching Gladiator as I was going through all of this stuff.
Is that where the soundbite came from?
That's where I have several...
I have to go back and watch it.
I have several more.
Movie.
Oh, it is. Yeah. But it was weird because... So, if you don't know the Ridley Scott movie with Russell Crowe, Dreamboat... So
carry on,
right? Or at least attempt to now.
I've done fucked you up.
So you have this quote, and it really struck me. It's ironic that this is took place toward the latter part of Rome and everything else. If you know the history, not the literal movie, but you have this quote of a couple senators talking in the market or wherever, just having a casual conversation. But it really kind of struck me. So here's the quote.
It's cleverer than I thought.
Clever. The whole of Rome have been laughing at him. They weren't so afraid of his Praetorian.
Fear and wonder. Powerful combination.
You really think that people are going to be seduced by that?
I think he knows what Rome is. Rome's the mob. You conjure magic for them and they'll be distracted. We take away their freedom and still they'll roar. The beating heart of Rome is not the marble of the Senate. It's the sand of the Colosseum. You'll bring them death, and they will love him for it.
That's poignant.
It really is. How crazy is that? And that's essentially what these gun control.
Hollywood is. Hollywood is the Colosseum. Really,
culture is the Colosseum.
Yeah. Well, but Hollywood is the one that Hollywood and the music industry and just the entertainment industry in general, everything outside of the counterculture.
Yeah,
that's exactly what it is. Yeah. It's just the new opiate of the masses.
Right. And these gun control policies are going to do nothing but bring death. and people are cheering it from the stands, and it's amazing. It's amazing to see this, and there was a ton. Seriously, go back and watch this movie, and then apply some of the things that are said to today's society. It's kind of weird and very interesting.
It's not an accident, I would say.
I'm usually not this dramatic, but it really struck me as like, wow, this really applies.
Now I really do got to go back and watch the movie. It really is a good movie.
It's not even like a waste of time. It's a great movie. It's an entertaining movie.
Yep.
So, but so the question then becomes, well, how in the world do we move forward with these laws and everything? So the easiest way for them to do it, well, a potential way to do it. It's not necessarily the easiest way. It kind of is, depending on how they do it, because they have control of the government, the Democrats, that being. But getting rid of the filibuster. This is the big narrative also coming out of this, and how we're going to pass gun control in this country is to get rid of the filibuster. So, filibuster, very misunderstood thing. Here's what it is, what it isn't, and kind of how it works. So, for starters, the filibuster is any Senate tactic to hold up a bill or nomination. So this is very specific in that.
Is it specific to the Senate?
Yes.
This doesn't happen in the House.
Correct.
Okay.
This is a Senate only.
I don't know a whole lot about this stuff. I mean, I have a basic understanding of filibuster.
Well, a lot of people even think they do, because a lot of people think that it's like Mr. Whatever Goes to Washington. I believe Cary Grant was in it, or somebody. It's a movie from the 50s where the guy goes and he speaks on the Senate floor for hours and just talking nonstop. Well, that's not the only way the filibuster works nowadays, which is what people really think it is. But the key point here is that you're holding up a bill or a nomination by some tactic. By nature, the Senate features unlimited debate, so there's no time limit on any of the debate that can happen in the Senate. There's no rules regarding how long it's going to take or whatever. They have to get the vote in order to stop the debate. And so that's how you put a stop to it. But if you don't have the votes, then the debate may never be over until you get the votes. So, if a senator has the floor and wants to talk, they can delay something by talking. So that's typically what you people know as the filibuster, is the quote unquote speaking filibuster. But it's not a filibuster if a senator isn't actually delaying something. And there's nothing that says that you can't stand on the Senate floor for 12 hours and just talk. And
I've heard that people will even read Green Eggs and Ham for 12 hours.
So Ted Cruz did that years ago, in 2017 or 16, I believe. Maybe it was longer ago than that. But that's how I kind of came into contact with Ted Cruz, was him making national headlines for doing that, and they applied that as the filibuster to him. But it really wasn't, because there was nothing he could do to hold up the nomination that he was trying to hold up. I forget who it was.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
But yeah, so that was wrongly applied by the media to him. He wasn't. He was just giving a really long speech, essentially, because there was nothing he could filibuster. He couldn't do anything to stop it. So that's Senate Rule 22. All this is linked in the show notes as well. So you have to bring close to the debate on any measure or motion, you have to have a vote. And you have to have a vote of 60 senators willing to vote yes. That stops the filibuster. And it stops the debate on the bill and going to the final vote on the bill. So the convolution comes in because the word debate in the Senate doesn't actually mean debate. It means, it's kind of a broad term that means you're just, delaying stuff and delaying work from actually going on. So
it's procedural, right?
Yes.
Okay.
In the
it's a procedural term as opposed
Yes.
to there necessarily being point and counterpoint.
Right. Yeah. There really is no debate. It's just, hey, I want to implement the filibuster, and then because most of the time because Biden made the comment that there's 500 times the filibusters in the last couple years than in history or whatever. Well, that's because they can implement the filibuster by making a phone call and being like, hey, we're going to do the filibuster, and nobody's even on the floor. Nobody's doing anything. It's just holding up a bill or a nomination. And so that's how most of the stuff happens. And it happens, and which this really gets into kind of the lack of transparency in a lot of ways. Because the Senate, obviously, whenever the Congress is in session, all the proceedings are recorded. They're all on C-SPAN. It's all available for public consumption. When they're doing this kind of stuff in the background, you have no idea what they're talking about or what they're doing. So that's kind of the kind of sketchy part about this filibuster thing. And so, yeah, Republicans are predicting now that the Democrats may use S1, which is Senate 1 bill, which was what we talked about, the HR1 voting rights bill a couple weeks ago, to get rid of the filibuster.
So as I understand what you're saying here is that a filibuster can effectively last like an entire term.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's something I didn't understand.
There's no... I mean, it could last
I've only ever had a
decades.
basic understanding of it.
Yeah, well...
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So basically, and that's where you get into, to overrule the filibuster, you need the supermajority vote.
Yep.
To end the filibuster. Basically, which ending a filibuster just means allowing the vote.
Right. Yeah, you're calling for you're calling for a vote on the bill. Okay. So you have to get 60 in order to do that.
67.
Or 6, yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, 67, and yeah, you're right. So yeah, you know, and the Democrats are saying that this is a Jim Crow relic and everything else. Well,
haven't they taken advantage of the filibuster over and over again?
Our vice president, as early as last year, did it to Tim Scott, who was a African American senator from South Carolina, over the police reform bill that he proposed, which was a very good bill, actually. And I read through it because I was a big fan of it at the time. And her and several other Democrats used the filibuster to knock it down and keep it from passing. And even our beloved Messiah, then Senator Barack Obama, defended the use of the filibuster back in 2005. Here's what he said then.
The American people want less partisanship in this town, but everyone in this chamber knows that if the majority chooses to end the filibuster, if they choose to change the rules and put an end to democratic debate, then the fighting and the bitterness and the gridlock will only get worse. Now, I understand that Republicans are getting a lot of pressure to do this from factions outside the chamber. But we need to rise above the ends justify the means mentality, because we're here to answer to the people, all of the people, not just the ones that are wearing our particular party label.
How weird, coming from the left.
But now he says it's racist?
Yeah, now he's calling it the same thing as a relic of the Jim Crow
Does that
era.
mean that Barack Obama is admitting that he used to be a racist?
I mean, that's the only logical conclusion. That also means that Vice President Harris is a racist. That also means
whenever the left says anything is racist, you can pretty much just you can pretty much just write it off.
Right.
Like you don't even we'll get into this, I'm sure, when we get into our discussion. But it's just not even worth engaging anymore. There's no point in debating with a leftist about whether or not something's racist. There's no point whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree. In this point, I definitely agree with you there. Because especially when something as stupid as this, like this is just stupid. There's no other way to put this.
Right. And they're going to want to take advantage of the filibuster one day. So for them to try to get rid of it now is like...
Right. Well, and see, that's the thing. That's what they're grappling with. Is they need to get rid of it in order to get this passed. But then at some point, either before they lose power or whatever, they would have to try to implement it back, which the Republican Party is not going to allow if they get rid of it. Because if the Republican Party gets power in 2022, they're going to be like, hey, guess what? We can do this too.
Yep.
And so, this is what they're grappling with right now. But this is one possible way that they're going to get this. They could get these gun control laws passed in this country. And this is what they're talking about. This is the scary part. This is not something that's, overwrought and everything. It's not scare tactics. This is literally the debate going on behind closed doors right now in the Senate. Whether or not they do this in order to get this stuff passed, because...
In order to trample on our rights.
Right. I mean, because they could pass anything. That's they can pass any bill. They have the numbers, minimal, to pass a bill and get it to the president's desk. But they need to overcome some procedural checks. This is the filibuster is, if you're a conservative, you don't even have to be conservative. If you love America, the filibuster is the only check left for the Republicans right now on the Democratic Party. And if they get rid of it, then they're just going to start ramming down this stuff.
People like to complain about gridlock. I love gridlock.
Gridlock is why the government was designed the way
gridlock.
Gridlock is
people love to complain about it, but gridlock is
a
conservative's wet dream. If you want freedom, if you want to protect freedom, you want the government to do as little as possible. And the way that they do as little as possible is through gridlock.
Right. And see, this is the thing. I don't even know of a real, I don't have a real person who wants, who doesn't want gridlock. Like, you hear it from the left, typically the left politicians all the time. But I don't know a real person, like an actual person in my life, that is really for this in any way. Because, like I said, if you don't have a check on government, then the other side, just the majority, it's mob rule. The majority has free reign to do and pass anything that they want. And so that's the very last thing that we want, regardless of position. I don't even want it for the conservative people. I don't even want it for people who agree with me, because it always leads to corruption. You know, what is it? The more power leads to more corruption. Things like that. We don't want that in this country. The government was designed to be in gridlock, and the gridlock that we have currently is the best possible scenario if these radical people, these far-leaning people, are going to be in charge of our government. This is the only way that that you and I are going to be anywhere close to being protected as far as our freedoms, our rights go, especially when it comes to guns and things like that. So that does it for national news for this week.
All right.
Wish there was better stuff to talk about.
Speaking of guns, you heard about this Addiston police officer, police chief?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is nuts.
So this is from Cincinnati, WKRC, former Addiston... How do you say that? Is it Addiston?
Addiston.
Addiston?
Yeah.
Former Addiston Police Chief Dorian LaCourse is facing federal charges for his alleged role in a scheme to acquire and resell machine guns. LaCourse faces charges of conspiracy and making false statements to the ATF. LaCourse surrendered to authorities Friday morning. 2 Indiana gun dealers are also indicted as part of this investigation. Jonathan Markham of Laurel and Christopher Petty of Lawrenceburg are each charged with conspiracy. I'm going to get into just these last couple details because I think this is important. LaCourse is accused of illegally requesting dozens of machine guns under the pretense of buying them for the department or for demonstrations, and then turning the guns over to Markham and Petty to sell, according to U.S. Attorney John Childress.
200 fully automatic weapons.
Yeah.
That's insane. This is not some small thing.
Right.
This is huge.
And this is, and it's funny because where I found this was actually the left is going nuts over this. They're like, oh, look, see, police doing all this stuff. It's like, this doesn't actually tell the narrative that you think it does.
Right.
This is a criminal.
Right. Yeah.
Who infiltrated the police department and used special government privileges to commit crimes.
Right.
That's what happened here.
Right.
Because you guys decided that carrying a machine gun or possessing a machine gun, the average citizen, makes them a criminal.
Right.
So all you're doing, and this is the point I wanted to make before, when the government bans anything, be it a gun, a drug, or anything, all they're doing is they're creating a special class of people who can actually, because you have to have police have to be able to possess drugs in order to confiscate them, right? So legally, police are allowed to possess drugs.
Right.
Which they could then go and sell for, same thing with guns. It's the same. So all you're doing is creating a special class of people who get to take advantage of a privilege that the average person does not get to have.
Right.
So you're creating a loophole for criminals. So if somebody wants to actually get in the business of selling illegal firearms or selling illegal drugs or anything like that, all they have to do, I know I'm making it sound simpler than it probably is,
well, right.
but
it's possible.
Eventually it will happen, obviously.
Right.
Clearly, one of these guys is going to get through and find this way into that loophole. And now, he's getting caught and all that kind of stuff, but those guns have already been sold and distributed
They're gone.
to who knows who.
Right.
but they're not to average law-abiding citizens. You know that for sure. So the average law-abiding citizen is basically at the mercy of these criminals who have machine guns.
Right, and I believe the article flat out said he sold them to other gun dealers.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that is kind of a really broad term in itself.
Yeah.
You know, or are they using that term to describe somebody who is a criminal or a legitimate, person who sells guns? We don't know.
Yep.
Where does this really go? And he's facing 20 years in prison.
Good.
I mean, right. And apparently the cost for that, apparently his number was $11,500. That's all he made off of 200 weapons, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Because they're worth way more than that.
All this
It's
has
amazing.
done is empowered criminals over
Absolutely.
the population. That's what these bans
Absolutely.
have done. That's what we're expecting to happen if they ban the AR-15.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? You are empowering criminals because criminals are willing to take the risk of imprisonment.
Right.
Law-abiding citizens are not, typically. Right? So all you're doing is, when you create a ban like this, is empowering criminals over the law-abiding citizens.
Sure.
That's what happens. We got to stop with this nonsense. Man, I'm freaking tired of it.
It's insane.
But then, speaking of which, I love the way that City Beats words this. So, Ohio House Republicans are trying to get rid of the concealed carry license requirement. And I love this. Freaking City Beat. So from City Beat, their headline is, "After a week of gun violence, Ohio House Republicans seek to expand concealed carry." Wow, not a narrative being sold there, is there? So again,
but even at that, what's so wrong with that?
Well, yeah, I mean, because the way I read that is, after a week of gun violence, we're finally going to do something good about it, such as get rid of stupid rules, right? That's how I read it. But of course, the way they're trying to sell it is, hey, look, we're trying to protect ourselves from all these crazy gun people, and you're making it worse by making it easier for law-abiding citizens to possess guns, whatever.
Right.
And here they continue, very first sentence. After a spate of 7 mass shootings around the U.S. in 7 days, Ohio House Republicans introduced legislation that would allow Ohioans aged 21 and older to carry a concealed weapon without a license.
The way it should be.
This was introduced by Tom Brinkman and Chris Jordan.
It's constitutional carry if you don't know the term.
Right.
This is what this is typically described as.
I mean, right. I mean, do we need a license for any other of our natural born rights?
I mean,
right?
No.
Do we need a license to speak? Do we need a license to go to church? Well, these days, I mean, we're about to. That's effectively what this passport is going to be, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to engage in everyday life, they want us to have us. They want to have us. I mean, where's that going to end? It's clearly they don't have any limits.
No. Because
to where this license crap ends.
Right, because it's a way for the government to make money. Mm-hmm. It's a way to get involved more in your life. It's a way to keep track of everything. So, I mean, it doesn't. Criminals don't follow the law anyway. Why are we making laws that are restricting the rights of normal, average people? Like, this is the part that just pisses me off, because responsible people who own guns don't have an issue with the background check laws and everything else. Because we're responsible people. We have nothing to hide in that regard. So if you're the only person that you're affecting is me.
Yep.
And people like me who would like to own a gun. Not a criminal. He doesn't even recognize the law in the first place. It's like it's like you telling your kid, "Don't touch the stove," and then he goes and touches the stove anyway, because until he has that experience, typically, they don't really understand what you're talking about, that the stove is hot. It doesn't mean anything to them. They don't recognize your authority in that situation.
Right.
Just as a criminal doesn't recognize authority in anything when it comes to the law. But the one thing I do kind of, I don't have an issue with, but this would repeal the requirement to tell an officer when he pulls you over that you have a gun in the car. I'm not opposed to repealing that, but here's the thing, especially for if you own a gun, it's definitely a good thing to tell the cop that there's a gun in the vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, I might do that anyway.
Yeah,
but...
well, right, and I do too, because I don't personally have a concealed carry, but my dad does, and I drive his truck every now and again, which has the gun in the truck. Well, obviously it's locked up, so I don't have access to it, but in that regard, if I've gotten pulled over like once in his truck or twice, and the first things out of my mouth are, "Sir, there is a weapon in this car." Because guess what, guys? They know who has concealed carry permits in this. If the car is registered to somebody with a concealed carry permit, they have that information before he even walks up to my vehicle, and so, or the vehicle I'm driving.
Yeah.
And so, if I'm not the registered owner of that vehicle, that means I potentially have access to a deadly weapon, which puts his life in danger. Which automatically, when he hears that, hey, this isn't my truck, I'm not the guy who is actually registered, automatically is going to make your hair stand on end. It literally made my hairs on my arm stand on end just saying that. So, even if you don't have the requirement, it's still a good idea.
Well, this goes back to what I've said, though, before about the police department, is it all depends on the makeup of the police department.
That's true.
I support the police.
Absolutely.
However, I can't trust that the makeup of the police department is always going to be a constitutional, good people, right?
Sure.
And because of that, I'd
we
rather it be left up to my own judgment about when I'm
Exactly.
going to reveal that. Because if it gets to the point where I'm learning that I cannot trust my police department, and the left talks about how they can't trust the police all the time, right? So if it gets to that point where I feel like I can't trust the police department, I do want it to be left up to my discretion about whether or not I'm going to reveal what weapons I have.
Sure.
Because... You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't want them to use that as an excuse. If he's a corrupt police officer, I don't want him to take that information and give it to somebody else who doesn't need to have that information.
Right.
We just saw a chief of police who was willing to go to extreme lengths to break the law.
Exactly.
Right? So again,
it's not that it doesn't happen.
It's not about not supporting the police. This is about having a healthy amount of skepticism and lack of trust for a system that isn't always going to be there to protect you.
Right. And to be clear on those situations, none of them ended up in any adverse. There was nothing that happened. He acknowledged it and was like, okay.
Yeah.
And that was
I've done it too. Yeah,
that was
I've been there.
Yeah. So
and I'm
there's
happy
nothing to fear.
If again, like you were saying, if they do end up making it to where it's not a requirement to reveal that you have a gun in the car, more than likely, more often than not, I probably will still let them know out of my own protection, right?
And it's their protection too,
and for their protection to make them. I want everybody to be as comfortable as possible.
Exactly.
But again, if I don't trust the makeup of the police department, I want it to be left up to my own discretion.
Right. And that's fair. That's the way it should be anyway.
More Ohio legislative news. This is some good news. They're overriding DeWine's veto of the Pandemic Authority Bill.
Right.
So, as I understand, it's not going to go into effect for 3 months, but effectively, let's see. Less than 24 hours after vetoed the bill, lawmakers strike down public health orders. GOP supermajorities mobilized to override his veto. DeWine wants to be able to control everybody's life. He wants to be able to make you wear a mask as long as he possibly can. Now, here's what I suspect is going to happen. First off, this is good, but it's not going to have any effect in the short term, really. I mean, it is in the sense that it's going to end the mandates that are unconstitutional, at least from DeWine's desk. Right. They might still decide they want to pass those kinds of things, but I suspect they won't, at least in the Ohio legislature. But hold on, I want to finish my point. What I think is good about this. Or what I suspect about this is that DeWine eventually is just going to say, okay, fine, I'm gonna end all of my restrictions.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to end all of this, and he's going to take credit for it, even though really he's forcing his hand is being forced by the Ohio legislature. He's going to try to. That's what I predict is going to happen. He will try to take credit for. Right. He'll try to be the hero. Hey, look, I finally gave you your rights back.
Well, right.
Screw you, dude.
And not only that, he's up for re-election, or he wants to run for re-election. So of course it's going to be a good political move for him.
Right.
But I'm like you said, like this is a good thing. The real issue here is that this is actually the issue of the legislature abdicating their role in government. It's the legislature's job. If restrictions like this are going to exist, it's the legislature's job to put them in place. Not DeWine's, not any executive. Again, this goes back to executive order type stuff.
They tried to impeach him.
Well, right.
Didn't work.
Right. And so, but that's the system working in itself. If it doesn't, even if it doesn't work out the way we would kind of want it to, it's still the system working, which is why we have the longest standing democracy in the world.
It's things like that and the
world.
filibuster and all of that stuff that gives me at least a little bit of faith in the
Yes.
system that was designed in the first place.
Right.
That provides at least some kind of check.
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
without those checks, boy,
Right.
we would be
like I said,
in deep shit.
I don't want it for either side. I don't want anybody to have the ability to just be an authoritarian and just take over. The Democrats are criticizing this as saying they're not experts in health matters and everything else, so this is not their lane, that we should stay out of the lane. Well, guess what? The health experts aren't the experts in creating legislature.
Right.
So this whole argument goes
They're
both
not
ways.
experts in how businesses operate.
Right.
They're not experts in how the economy operates.
And
There's a lot of things that are interconnected here
Right.
that the health experts are
Have
completely
no idea.
clueless
Yeah.
on,
Have
but
no
their supposed decisions and expertise is going to have an impact on
Right.
it and needs to be considered by people outside of the expertise.
Well,
So-
right. And plus, if you're going to make legislation, you elected people to do it. That's their job, and their job is to account for the things that they pass.
Yeah.
So
I thought these guys liked democracy.
exactly, and
mean,
so
isn't that the whole point here?
by abdicating that responsibility to somebody who is not an elected official, you're screwing us, because who are we going to hold accountable? Well, somebody who was just appointed to a position. It doesn't, and this is the way that politicians get around this kind of crap and subvert the system.
So a little more local. Outdoor drink area debuts in Cincinnati at the Banks. So this is something that I guess has been in the works for a little while, but they're going to allow in a certain designated area, you're allowed to have refreshments, including alcohol.
It's like 84 acres. It's huge.
Yeah, and it's called DORA, which is kind of a dumb name, but it stands for Designated Outdoor Refreshment Area. So they just started this. It's just kicking off. And first off, I'm okay with this move. I'm always a fan of the government taking a few steps out of controlling things, and this is an example of them doing that. And I think because of that, you're going to see a relative boom to the Cincinnati economy. But at the same time,
hopefully,
there are, I don't know if you saw this, but there have been some social distancing concerns about what's been going on there.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting that the people who decided that the DORA thing needed to happen, which, again, I agree with,
Right.
did not take into consideration the social distancing concerns, or they don't care.
Well,
And
if you're outside, the CDC policy pretty much negates any transmission of COVID anyway, as long as you're standing a distance apart. So it's like,
right,
the social distancing thing, that was the whole point of taking the inside outside kind of thing with this whole social distancing thing, because outdoors you have a far less percentage of transmission.
But the problem is if you're still close together, according to the CDC, there's still the 3 feet, right? And in this situation, more often than not, you're going to be within 3 feet of a number of different people. And if that's the case,
but you don't have to be.
No, you don't.
If it's 84 acres.
No. But, right. And I'm not arguing that there's anything wrong with anybody being within 3 feet of each other, trying to get a beer and whatever else. Have at it. I mean, I'll go and do it. I mean, I'm not worried, and I'm not vaccinated. I don't care. I'm not worried about any of this. But my point is that it seems interesting that the very people who are claiming to be concerned about the social distancing stuff are suddenly implementing things like this that create a lack of social distancing.
Right. Well,
so that's my only criticism of the thing.
Yeah.
I think it should happen. I'm totally fine with the DORA. I think, again, less government is always better.
Absolutely. And small business benefiting and being the way forward in this is always the best move, in my opinion, anyway, too. The only criticism I have is that some of the places that this is located. So it includes an area, or the area between the two stadiums, between the Red Stadium and the Bengal Stadium, or between maybe all three of the stadiums are included in it with the new FC Stadium. But those places are typically family friendly. And so as a parent, this is just my concern that we know how people act when they get some alcohol in them. Now you're taking people outdoors. Now you're having people around potential families and young kids. You understand that the same argument can be said in the stadium with the drunks and everything else too. But it's just a risk versus reward type of situation, and it's just something. But you're also
that's up to the parents to handle.
And that's what I'm saying. It's a risk versus reward.
I mean, you can be concerned about it, and
Yeah.
justifiably so.
Well, right.
But as you said,
again,
same thing happens in the stadiums. It's up to you as a parent to manage
overall,
that.
I'm for this. But also another issue is potentially, depending on where these issues or where these areas are in relation to the streets and everything else, you have other issues with traffic and all this other kind of garbage. So it's just something to think about. I don't know. Like I said, overall, I'm for this. You know, I'm absolutely 100% for this because we need to get out of this mentality of living in fear of living. It used to be before the pandemic, we were afraid to die. Now we're afraid to live. And it's, this is, Again,
so I'm glad that it's happening. I think this is good news overall.
Yeah.
Again,
for business,
especially. If anybody is for it, but is still trying to claim that we need to follow these ridiculous restrictions, you've got some explaining to do.
Get out of here with that crap. Right. Go to Chicago.
Did you hear about this Westchester trustee?
I did. This story is wild.
Yeah.
It really is.
So this kind of gets into the racial issues, particularly related to Asians. But Westchester trustee shows scars on his chest during meeting to challenge treatment of Asian Americans. Now, here's what really bothers me about this right off the bat is immediately what does it sound like? It sounds like he got those scars because he's an Asian American.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's in the context, and we'll get into the story, but it's in the context of Asian Americans being targeted supposedly in this country more and more thanks to the labeling of the coronavirus as the Chinese virus and all this other nonsense, right?
Right.
But that's not at all how he got those scars.
Right.
He was in the Army, and thank you for your service, but he got those, and it's a pretty nasty scar. I mean,
it's horrifying if you haven't seen it.
Yeah. You know what? I think you got a soundbite, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'll let you play it.
Here it goes.
A little hard on this issue here. People question my patriotism, that I don't look American enough. They could not get over this face. I want to show you something. I want to tell you, because I'm not afraid. I don't have to live in fear, intimidation, or insults. I'm 69 years old, and I'm going to show you what patriotism, the questions about patriotism looks like. Here is my proof. This is sustained from my service in the U.S. military. Now, is this patriot enough? I'm not ashamed to walk around anymore.
So, look, all right, we get the point. And here's the problem. Again, thank you for your service, sir, but how dare you throw that in our face?
Yeah.
The way you're doing that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Your scars have nothing whatsoever to do with your race. Nothing.
Right.
It's because you served in the Army that you got those scars. And again, thank you for that, but has absolutely nothing to do with your race. You're pulling a stunt. Yes. Based off of very questionable suggestions of of a rise of anti-Asian hate crimes in this country, which, as far as I can tell, doesn't actually exist. All we have are these anecdotes. And you're also going to claim that people are calling you not patriotic. I don't know where you're getting that from. Yeah. Now, are they calling you not patriotic because you're a leftist? And a lot of leftists tend to say a lot of awful things about America and Americans in general? Or are they actually calling you that because you look Asian?
Right. Well, right.
So all of these are claims. I mean, we have no way of validating any of the claims that he's saying is people have targeted him or harassed him or criticized him for not looking patriotic enough.
Right.
All we have is your word, dude.
Right. Well, and even sustaining these injuries in the military doesn't even tell you the story either. Like, he's 70 years old, or nearly 70 years old. So that puts him in the realm of what? Besides Desert Storm. You know, like,
is he...
I think he's too young for Korea.
Yeah, it's got to be Vietnam then, I guess, right?
Maybe Nam.
Yeah. So, but we don't even know that portion, if any of that is even true, is my point.
I'll take him at his word on that one.
No, I believe that he sustained it during the military service. I get it. But my point is, like you said, to use it in relation to all this racism and stuff, or alleged racism. And the part that really grates, when as soon as he said it, I just started screaming at the screen. But what not looking American enough means.
Who says that?
Right. And this is my point. You can say that about a lot of other countries in this world, but not America.
Right.
You can say that about Asian countries.
Yeah. Almost every Asian country.
Exactly. They're very homogenous.
Yeah,
America
absolutely.
is anything but. So what does that really even... Like, that is the part that just pisses me off with this kind of stuff. Because... I mean,
I'm sorry. I just don't believe you. I do not believe you that this is not you. I do not believe that this is what that people are coming up to you and saying that you don't look American enough because you're Asian. And if they did, and that's a big if, I would bet that it was in total jest.
Right.
If at all, because I've said things crazy.
Oh, sure.
In total jest. You know, with friends that I'm totally close with, and you know what I mean. But he was in the Army. He very well could have caught a ribbon all the time from people that he served with, that were all total in jest, all in good fun.
Right.
That now he gets to decide is part. Now, I'm making an assertion too, but that's my point. Is that it's just an assertion.
Yeah, we don't know.
Who knows?
We don't know. He knows.
It's just a claim.
Right. He knows, but we don't.
Right.
None of us. None of the media. None of any of us.
But again, my big problem too is just the way that this is just described by the media.
Yeah.
And this was from Journal News, Butler County's local news now. Again, that headline: Westchester trustee shows scars on his chest during meeting to challenge treatment of Asian Americans.
Yeah.
It suggests, and people don't always read past the headlines, and this person knows this.
Right.
Right. It suggests that the scars have anything to do with his race, and they don't. They have nothing to do with his race.
Right.
So it's just maddening that we go that we even go here.
It's the lowest common denominator.
It really is. It really is. So and the other thing is too is white people do not get to do this.
Right.
White people do not get to make claims that they are treated unfairly as a result of their race, even though we know damn well it happens.
I've been laughed at for it.
Oh yeah, it always laughed at. They always laugh at you for it, right? Yeah. And they laughed at me for it, right? Which I mean, honestly, just to prove the point. In all reality, it's like ha 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 ha, white guy. Well, yeah, exactly, white guy, right? But just a week or so ago, I don't know exactly what the date is on this, but here it is. Let me pull it up. In Pittsburgh. Now I know this isn't local, but this just happened on the 24th of March. That's when it was. This just happened. A black guy randomly attacked a 12-year-old white boy at a McDonald's.
This is horrifying.
It is horrifying. He stands accused, this is according to Washington Examiner. Pittsburgh man stands accused of tackling and stabbing a 12-year-old boy at a McDonald's in an attack that police say was racially charged.
Yep.
He's a 51-year-old black man. His name is Charles Edward Turner, reportedly called police and McDonald's staff white devils and white N-words as they tried to restrain him after he slashed a 12-year-old with a box cutter. Now, what did,
Yeah. What is going on?
How...
we
had this just happened on the 24th of this month.
Right.
This just happened.
Right.
But we can't at all, white people cannot at all claim that we are mistreated due to our own race.
Right.
I mean, this guy is claiming somebody said something unpolite to him.
Yep.
Right? This Westchester trustee is saying somebody claimed he didn't look patriotic enough.
Yeah.
Well, we got black guys slashing white children with box cutters.
And
because they're white, clearly because they're white.
And a media blackout on it.
Right, and a media blackout, but we can't ever stand up and say, hey, you know what? It'd be nice if people would treat us a little better.
Right.
Treat
everybody better.
Especially our children.
Right.
Right.
Treat everybody better.
Well, agreed. But
I mean,
but my point is that
why can't we all be better? Why does it have to be white people that be better?
Well, I mean, apparently it's important when a certain group of people are targeted to call attention to that certain group. And maybe that's true and maybe it's not. I don't know. But if it is true, then white people get to as well.
Well, sure. And my contention with a lot of these stories is if the facts back up your assertion, I'm more than likely to get on board with you.
Yeah.
But when they don't, and you're trying to create a narrative, more or less, with your assertion, that's when I have the issue. Just like this story, it's also linked in the show notes, the 2 teenagers who set a mentally ill man on fire.
Oh, yeah.
In Rochester, New York. Too, right? Media blackout. The only people reporting this thing mainly were the local news stations, and they didn't even report the race to begin with. And the guy was burned. They broke into this guy's apartment, sprayed him with an ignitable fluid, set him on fire, and left him to die. And
did he die?
He died 4 days later in a burn unit.
He was mentally handicapped.
Yes, he was mentally handicapped. 70% of his body was burned from the incident. A mail carrier or gas man, I haven't found out which one. The media reported both. Some utility worker, some type of person like that, came in, found the man, and put him out, called the police, and called for an ambulance.
Have they confirmed if it was racially motivated? Or is it just a matter of...
Okay. I haven't found anything on it because, again, nobody's reporting it.
Well, and here's the thing.
But all of these teenagers were all, in fact, black.
Right.
So
here's the thing. I wouldn't even necessarily jump to the conclusion that they went after this guy because he's a white guy.
Well, right. We don't.
I mean, I might assume.
That.
I might assume because some people are really just vicious people and they like to go after weak people.
Right.
And mentally handicapped people are vulnerable, and some people are just monsters and they go after vulnerable people. Right.
Exactly.
So I might assume. I mean, I don't know for sure even that either, but I might assume that before I would assume they went after him because he's white. But again, roles reversed. I know that's cliche, and we're tired of saying. That was
exactly why this story came to light. Right. Was a guy tweeted
But roles reversed. You know damn well if this was a mentally handicapped black guy and a bunch of white teens went and set this guy on fire until he died 4 days later.
Right.
You know damn well that the first thing that they would go to is his race, and they wouldn't even start with his mental capacity.
Oh, right. And this happened too. If you remember back to 2017. The 4 black kids
that I know exactly
tortured the guy, the mentally handicapped white kid,
and that
Facebook
was
Live.
Racially motivated. It was politically motivated because remember they were forcing him to say things like "fuck Donald Trump" and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and so we've seen this before. Like this is nothing new, but that's all in the show notes. Or the show notes,
right? Yeah, chronicles.org, guys. And speaking of race issues, we talked last week about that $290 million stimulus money.
Oh, yeah.
Some of that is going to be going specifically to black-owned businesses. So this is according to WCPO.
Mm-hmm.
Portion of a $290 million stimulus allocated to the city of Cincinnati by the federal government is being earmarked for black-owned businesses. Mayor John Cranley made the announcement Thursday, and several black-owned business owners and entrepreneurs said they're ready to jump at the opportunity. Well, of course they are. I mean, I would be too.
Well, right. Free money, man.
But I know this is obvious, but is it not racist to favor one race over another? And of course they're going to come up with the excuse,
definition.
well, minorities are adversely affected more from economic lockdowns and
but they don't provide
COVID.
Any
I mean, they're not going to source that. They're just going to say it because it's always true that black people are victims and white people are not. So they're just it's just a given anymore. So because it's a given, we're going to discriminate against every other race except for black people and not call it racism.
Of course.
It's just maddening that we're even here. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it's the money is not about going to relieving the economic issues as a result of the lockdowns.
Right.
That's not what it's about, because their primary focus is on appeasing certain groups of people.
Right. And alienating others.
And alienating the rest. And we're supposed to act like this is actually going to do us any favors. And similarly...
We're supposed to go and act like it's okay, too.
Right. Similarly, some of that money is supposed to go to the Black Lives Matter mural downtown, which shouldn't exist in the first place. But this is again... the Cincinnati Enquirer. Traffic, weather, and even an act of vandalism last year have worn down the Black Lives Matter mural on an asphalt of Plum Street outside Cincinnati City Hall. With $250,000 in federal stimulus money from the American Rescue Plan, the mural could return to its original glory when it was painted last summer amid the civil rights protest. And this is the city manager, Paula Boggs Muthing? I don't know how you say that. Recommended using $250,000 to rejuvenate. This thing was painted last year.
Right. That's my contention with it. So I don't have a problem with the art. I don't have a problem with the purpose. I don't have a problem with the message. I don't have a problem with it being in existence. I have a problem with the fiscal irresponsibility going on here. This is $250,000 that you're going to, assuming we're going to have to do this every single year. Mm-hmm. This $250,000 is going to have to be earmarked every year from here forward to
if we're going to keep this up.
Right.
Yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
Well,
put the thing in where put the thing on the side of a building. Put it somewhere in a park. I don't care where it is. Put it somewhere else if this is what you want to do with your time and money. Like that part, I don't really care about.
There's all kinds of murals all over the place that are privately managed. Why do we have to have federal money going to the? I mean, what does somebody in Arizona have to do with the Black Lives Matter mural in downtown Cincinnati?
Right.
Nothing. But they got to pay for it.
What do I have something to do? What do
I don't have anything to do with it. I live in this city.
I'm being alienated by this whole thing.
And it also speaks to what I said last week about how this money is it rearranges the incentives in a very inappropriate way.
Yep.
Where now, because they're talking about the big argument is that the arts really took a hit last year.
Right.
So in order for
so did everybody else.
Right. So in order, yeah. So what they're doing, and I'm sure that there's going to be money earmarked to other programs as well that are not necessarily race specific.
Right.
But
this is the narrative.
Right, but they want to make sure. But this again, it's virtue signaling with somebody else's money, right?
Yep.
So that's what that is, and
sure.
I don't like virtue signaling with my money. I think that's crap. But I also have a problem with the fact that we wouldn't do a Police Lives Matter mural. We wouldn't do a White Lives Matter mural. We wouldn't do, and we just talked about how a 12-year-old white boy's life didn't matter to a black man.
Right.
We just talked about that.
Right.
But we're not going to do a White Lives Matter mural. Right.
Or
and
protests.
The other thing is and this is something we talked about a few weeks ago. I remember because you told me about this. I didn't even know this was the case. But the 3%ers were disbanded.
Yes.
Conservative groups, patriot groups get disbanded because they are smeared as being the worst of the worst because perhaps a handful of people in the same name do some bad things.
Right.
Well, people have done some really awful things in the name of Black Lives Matter. And you've even seen Black Lives Matter protesters en masse marching down the street saying pigs in a blanket fry them like bacon.
Mm-hmm. New York City.
In New York City.
Well, that was when the whole movement started.
Exactly. When this whole thing started, that was
the pretense of the whole thing.
Yeah. It kicked off with that.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're concerned about how an entire movement looks based off of what a handful of people do, I'm certainly concerned about how this movement looks based off of what an entire crowd does.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just one example.
Right.
That doesn't take into account the Black Lives Matter activists that murdered those policemen in Dallas.
Right.
Yeah. So, if this is the standard that we are going to destroy any organization based off of what a handful of people do, then BLM needs to not exist anymore.
Oh, yeah.
It needs to not exist, and we certainly shouldn't be using tax dollars to make sure that we keep its painting, its murals, clean and fresh every year. Screw that.
Yeah. It's insane.
So that's it for local. That's what we got. Whew, man,
there's a lot
crazy stuff going on. Are we ready for the bonehead of the week?
I am.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I think I'm starting to realize that the bonehead of the week, more often than not, is going to be a supposed conservative or Republican.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's people that should know better.
I don't know that he is, though.
No, he's more. I mean, he's more right wing comparatively.
Yes, comparatively, but I don't know that he truly is. I don't know that I would classify him that.
No, he's had a history of being a little bit more conservative.
Well,
compared to the rest of Hollywood.
Yes, for sure.
People don't even know who we're saying yet. Right. Jay Leno is our bonehead of the week. Jay Leno, yeah. But I think just getting back to what I was saying, yeah. I think the reason why I keep picking on conservatives and Republicans is because you think they should know better.
You think?
You'd think. And Jay Leno should have known better. So,
I think he does.
If he did, then he wouldn't have done this. So here's the headline from MovieWeb. Jay Leno apologizes for decades of jokes perpetuating Asian stereotypes. After speaking with Media Action Network for Asian Americans leader Guy Aoki, Jay Leno formally apologized for often joking about Asian communities. Again, roles reversed.
Mm-hmm.
Can you not joke about white people?
Right.
If you can't joke about Asians, then you can't joke about white people either.
Well,
all right, so
yeah,
be consistent, right?
The whole premise of a comedian is that you're not supposed to take it seriously anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
like that's the whole that is the joke.
Exactly,
you're not supposed to take it seriously.
I mean, look at the Asian stereotypes that like South Park has joked.
Oh yeah,
and the fact is it's funny.
Well,
you can't control what's funny,
right? Well, what's his face? Chef, the guy who left the show over over the Scientology thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, dude, like you know what this show is.
Right. It's about lampooning everybody.
Exactly.
And you don't get special treatment.
Exactly.
Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. But we're giving special treatment to Asians, but we can
right
tell
now,
we can tell
today
boring
we are.
right, but we can tell boring white jokes all day long.
Oh, sure.
That are just okay, another white joke, good for you.
Right.
Oh, white guy can't jump. That's
Right.
funny. Right, like, and I have look. I'm not saying that to say that I have a problem with white jokes. I mean,
No.
if it's funny, it's funny. I don't know what to tell you.
Right.
But we can't tell Asian jokes, and we talked about this last week about
Mm-hmm.
how you can't tell Asian jokes anymore because the Cincinnati Asian Council or whatever you want to call them, they were talking about how you need to start calling these people out for telling
Right.
jokes like this. It's like,
grief.
why? Quit policing jokes.
Right.
And of all people, a comedian, maybe not necessarily conservative or Republican, but a
Right.
comedian ought to know this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You don't police jokes, and he just gave the go-ahead to the culture to police jokes as a comedian. Yes, he did because he took his
the
licking.
thing. Yes,
That's what he's doing.
yes.
He's taking his lashings. He's kissing the ass of the of the woke culture,
and the
who
reason,
doesn't like the fact that he was
Yes.
joking about Asians. Sorry to talk over.
No, you're fine. The reason for that though is because he has a TV show still. So Jay Leno's Garage is on what network? CNBC. NBC being one of the most liberal news or TV network out there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's be real. This was probably him getting crapped on by them and saying, "Hey, you need to make some apologies
So
here."
go to another network.
Yeah, but he can't take the show with him. The show is property of NBC.
Make
So-
a different show.
Agreed. I totally get it. But
Have
then-
some principle
but see,
for crying out
Here,
loud.
then he doesn't have the viewership, and he doesn't have
Right.
the marketing. He doesn't have all that back behind him that he
Dude,
has.
you're
now.
a millionaire. You're gonna be fine.
Agreed.
Gina Carano's gonna be fine.
Well,
if she can
I
be
don't know.
fine, you'll be fine.
Who knows? Maybe he spent all his money on his cars. You know what I mean? So let's be real. This is why this happened.
I'm sure it is.
Maybe he did grow over his, as he's aged. I don't know, but at the very least, this is to save his job. I can almost put money on it.
And I'll say the last thing I'll say about it. This is the big thing that bothers me. But here's the way I see it. When I've seen comedians apologize for this stuff before. In fact, I got in trouble with Twitter back before I wasn't banned anymore because I called, I think it was Jimmy Fallon, a pansy ass.
Yeah.
Because he apologized for doing
right.
a Chris Rock impression.
Right.
But here's what irks me about comedians who apologize for their jokes.
Mm-hmm.
A comedian who apologizes for their jokes is jokes that help them build their career, that help them get the laughs that they needed in order to build the career that they had and make the money that they had and be successful the way they were.
Right.
Are like children who pull up the rope once they've already gotten into the treehouse and won't let anybody else in.
Right.
It's like, dude, you're already successful. You're already there. You're already in the treehouse.
Right.
And you're going to pull up the ladder and say, I shouldn't have climbed that ladder. But you're already fucking up there, dude.
Right. Well, and that's exactly it. He can do this because he doesn't have anything really doesn't have anything to lose. He's already rich. People know who he is because of his previous career. So it's like, to him, maybe it was to save his job. I don't know. That's my assertion. But at the end of the day, he's not going to take that big of a hit. It's not like somebody who's out in comedy bars and out in bars every weekend struggling to try to make it in the comedy business. He's not one of those guys.
Now In reality, what he's doing is he's actually making it easier for the guy who has the balls to tell the Asian jokes.
Absolutely.
Right? So he's pulling up the rope ladder on the people who don't have the balls
sure.
to tell those jokes anymore, thanks to his apology. But the people that do have the balls, the few people end up rising to the top, and that's what I hope will end up happening. So, Bonehead of the week, Jay Leno. Come on, man. Seriously, like, quit apologizing for your jokes, comedians. I've had enough of it.
Be like
you got where you got because of your jokes.
Exactly.
Quit apologizing for your work.
Yeah, and do what Seinfeld did. Because he doesn't tour college campuses anymore for that reason. Because it's like, I'm not
get away
bowing.
from CNBC.
Right. Yeah, that's the easy answer. But of course, our money and everything's not involved either. So
sell a few cars and get a smaller mansion.
I mean, again, he could do it. That's not the question.
So I think we only have time for a short conversation because we've been going at this for a little while. But I do want to touch on what we started talking about last week related to our whether or not the debate with the left is over. So let's make sure we understand what our terms are here. Okay, a debate implies that it is in good faith.
Yes.
All right. There's debates and then there's bickering, which is not a debate.
Right.
Bickering is, you did this. No, you did this. Right. And then there is just flat out attacks, personal character attacks, character assassination, that kind of stuff. That's not a debate. Right. So as soon as any of that kind of stuff happens, it seems to me the debate is over.
Absolutely.
Right? As soon as
100%.
you get called a racist or a white supremacist, as soon as they call you names, ad hominems, as soon as they gaslight you, as soon as they engage, I might let the straw man fallacy slide because people can easily fall into that trap.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But when it's very clearly no longer a good faith argument, the debate is over.
Right.
So why I say that is because when we talk about whether or not the debate with the left is over, the left has decided that anybody who disagrees with them is a racist. And they will throw that at you every single time.
Absolutely.
Now, let me qualify that a little bit. I do have a buddy of mine that I'm still really good friends with who, I wouldn't call him a leftist, but I know he votes left.
Sure.
But he's...
So he's a liberal.
No.
Oh, no.
Well, no, because not in the classical sense of the term.
Right.
Right? I mean, he might call himself a liberal, but in the class...
So he's on the far left. He just at least has common courtesy.
I guess so, which is very rare.
It is. It truly is.
And maybe that's...
because they're taught that we're enemies. That we're evil people.
That we are evil, racists, and all that kind of stuff.
And that's why you get that behavior.
I mean, other than in jest, he's never accused me of being a racist.
Right.
And in fact, he's a bisexual. And, you know, I mean, he's heard me say a lot of spicy things in the past about people in general, you know what I mean? Or people in his category. But he knows it's in jest, and he doesn't actually think that I mean, at least he never says it. I mean, I mean, actions speak louder than words, and his actions have proven that he doesn't think the worst of me.
Right.
And no matter how spicy I've gotten, right?
But
the debate with him isn't over.
Right.
But the debate with the left as a whole, I think, is over.
Sure. Well, I think the big difference in that situation is you guys know each other. You actually know human to human who each other are, right? You know each other face to face.
Sure, but I know other people. I told you about
I know.
a relation recently who I know face to face, right?
But people of that
didn't matter.
Yeah. But typically
I'm still a racist to that guy.
Sure.
And that's happened with a lot of people I've known face to face, right?
Well, right, but I think the likelihood of that happening to somebody, and maybe it's easy, at least in my situation where family members have overstepped their bounds and I've just gotten rid of them out of my life.
Yeah. Which you got to do.
Right, because...
You don't let abusive people into your life.
Right. You don't let
abusive people shouldn't have access to you. And if they're calling you a racist and claiming that they're your friend and they're good with you, that's abusive. So,
but two, another characteristic of those people is that they're not people that I interact with regularly. They know me. They know me personally on some level, but it's not like I see them every week.
Yeah.
It's not that situation. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I think in that situation, there's far less likelihood of that actually happening, even if you do disagree.
But I don't see this guy all the time either anymore.
Well,
I mean, we were roommates
yeah.
at one point
and
or another,
he
but
just
I don't.
may be the outlier in every category.
I mean, we don't even live in the same city. Like he's
Right.
I mean, I haven't seen him in years. It's been
Right.
it's been a couple of years since maybe a year and a half, but
Right.
it's been a while since I've even seen him in person. But we
Sure.
stay in touch.
Sure.
But I think it's unfortunately it's rare, but there are people like him on the left that and I struggle to even call him a leftist, mostly because he's not like that. Right? But there's so many of them that are, that as a whole, again, I say that the debate with the left is over. So I guess my question is, do you agree with that? And if you do agree that as a whole, the debate with the left is over, what does that look like? What does that mean?
So I struggle, as I said last week, with completely abdicating and completely leaving the conversation. I struggle with that.
Well, hold on. That's not what I'm asking.
Well, if something's over, then it's
The
done.
debate is over.
Yeah.
The debate, because we both agree.
Like, I do agree with you in the sense that, and see, I think...
This is why I want to make sure we're clear on what the terms are.
Absolutely. No, I handle this on an individual level anyway. So, like you said, in the event that, ad hominem, things like that come out and out of their mouths towards me and whatever, obviously any conversation is over. I agree with Air. And to your point, the number of people that I've even run across in any sphere, in whether it be public or private, that can actually debate in the first place and have an honest discussion is very few, like you said. But to say that it's over, I don't know. I
guess that's where we got to clarify what it means for the debate to be over.
Yeah,
right?
because I would say if the question is the debate over, I would say no, because I don't think the debate could ever be over unless that position was completely eliminated altogether. Just as the same as the debate with liberals is not over, because those people still exist, and those are more prevalent in society, really, than these leftists. The leftists are just louder. And so I struggle with that portion of the question to begin with.
Sure. So again, we've already established that a debate requires that both parties are
good faith,
are arguing in good faith.
Yes.
Right? So, and you've also just said that the vast majority of the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but the vast majority of the time, the left is not going to argue in good faith. They're just going to call you a racist or a white supremacist.
Agreed.
Right? Okay.
I don't assume that, though. I don't put that assumption on the individual, I should say. I wait for them. I will have a conversation with them until they expose themselves.
But the outcome is still the vast majority of the time. So
absolutely.
you try to treat people as individuals, which I respect.
Yeah.
But you and I are both businessmen. We're both conservatives. We understand the importance of resources and that they are limited.
Absolutely.
Resources also include, it's not just money, it's not just food, it's also time, it's also calories, it's also energy, it's also our own mental, faculties, facilities. I can't remember what he said. Right.
I think that is what he said.
Yeah. I'm stumbling over the word just like he is, but just because I'm trying to remember what it is he said. But those are all resources too.
Yeah.
All right. So what I'm getting at is in terms of the debate on about anything with the left, is it worth fighting to debate in the hopes that we're going to come across that 1% or whatever we want to guess it is, as opposed to using those resources for something potential? I guess that's the question. Are there more productive uses for those resources than engaging in any debate or attempting to engage in a debate with a leftist?
I mean, you could argue, I myself could argue both sides of that question. I could say yes, it is worth it, because like I said last week, that truth is worth standing up for, truth is worth getting out to those people. And because I don't walk into the conversation with the assumption that even though this person may be a hard left communist, I don't automatically assume that they're going to be the type of person that's going to just go off and berate me and call me a racist just because I don't agree with them. Because I don't make that assumption, I can say that yes, it is worth my time if that person is not that kind of person. Now, if I walk into the conversation with the assumption that all leftists are this, or there are these people that want to just haul off and call me a racist, then no, it's not worth it in any regard. And that's kind of where I fall with, and this is why I say I struggle, because I don't make that assumption, but yet I know the outcome in most conversations. I've had very few conversations that end productively, or that are even productive for more than 5 minutes. You know, once you find a point that you disagree on, that person is going to expose themselves as either somebody who's tolerant of other people's views or somebody who's not. Mm-hmm. And so from that point on is where you really decide on how to handle the situation.
So let me counter it like this. To me, the discussion, I would argue, debate that we're having right now is an incredibly productive debate.
Yes.
And I think it's even productive for people who listen in on the debate.
Yes.
Because if I can convince our listeners to not even bother debating with leftists and to focus more on debating with each other. And I'm not talking about infighting. That's a different thing.
Right.
I'm talking about constructive debate like what we're having.
Yes.
They would get so much more out of it. Our community
Absolutely.
would get so much more out of it than they ever would.
Right.
Because we would be better at what we do, which is fighting
Absolutely.
for our rights, fighting for our freedoms,
Yeah.
right? Which we all agree we want freedom, we want rights. It's just a matter of how we're going to get there.
Right. And we would be involved in the first place.
Exactly. So I think that the counter, it's not to say that you shouldn't engage at all with leftists whatsoever, but what does that engagement look like?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's another conversation. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. If the debate is over with the left, then what does the engagement with the left look like? Because I'm not saying you step away entirely.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not saying that there is no engagement whatsoever with the left, because you need to know what the left is doing.
Absolutely.
Right? So you need to be on, hate to say it, you need to be on Facebook seeing what they're saying. You need to be on Twitter seeing what they're saying.
I mean, if we didn't do that, we couldn't even do this show tonight. You know what I mean? We had to look at their narrative.
It's so much better that you and I but it's so much better that you and I are having the discussion about what we see them talking about than it is for us to go and try to convince any of them to see anything our way.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to. 99% of the time, they're just going to call us a racist and a white supremacist. And then by doing that, they get to control the narrative. Because, the average person on the outside looking in, as soon as they hear those words, it has an emotional trigger for them. And they don't want to be on the side of the racist. Nobody does.
Right. Yeah, right. I don't think anybody would argue that they want to be on that side.
I think what I'm getting at here is that if the debate is over, we need to figure out what the engagement with the left looks like. But I do think that the debate as a whole with the left is over. There's no reason to try to convince a communist that communism is bad. You're not going to more often than not. You know what I mean? So you're not going to. I mean, we both know how hard it is to convince anybody of anything.
Sure.
I think it's much easier to convince each other. I think it's much easier for me to, as an example, for me to convince you not to debate the left anymore and to just debate me and other people in our community, so that we can become better at what we do, which is protecting our values, protecting our freedoms, and all that kind of stuff. Right? I think
true.
It's easier for me to convince you of that than it is for me to convince a commie not to be a commie.
Right. And see that,
and more productive.
Right. And I would say I agree with you. But
hey, look at that. Discussion over.
Right?
All right, I win.
Debate's over. But I would say, too, that particular point to convince a commie not to be a commie would not even be a discussion I would even have. Because I already know the outcome of that, and he already knows the outcome of that, or she already knows the outcome of that.
Or they.
Right. Or, yeah. Who knows anymore? Z or whatever the crap it is. But with that brings in the focus of your conversation. I would not have the conversation of don't be a communist anymore, but have the conversation of, okay, fine. What benefit does society at large have because of communism? That's a discussion that can actually be productive if they're willing to have a good faith discussion.
Which 99% of the time they're not
Agreed.
willing to, right? So
Agreed.
that's the problem.
Well, right. And that
this
would
goes back
be-
to what I've said. You got to operate with the world as it is, not as you'd like it to be. And I'd
Exactly.
like for a communist to be willing to have a constructive, productive debate with me, but they're not. They're just going to call me a racist, so what's the point?
Most of the time, yeah. But see, again, I don't go in with that some assumption that you just
But
detail.
no, I understand that. But what I'm getting at is it worth all of those calories to try to extract that one who's willing to have a productive debate? That what do you get out of that?
Yeah.
What's the return on the investment?
I understand.
And that's where I'm getting.
I
So
think a lot of that for me at least comes from religious belief.
Yeah.
I mean, we're taught to go out into the world. You're not going to turn around the whole world, but the one that you do, is that worth it? And so that's kind of where I stand on it, because my worldview doesn't allow my worldview to be consistent, I should say, because plenty of people just do. But to be consistent with my religious belief, I have to apply that to all areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I think the best way to detail that would be, I can't do it because of my religious belief in Christianity. So if I am going to do it here in this area, in the sphere of religion, I'm also going to have to do it in the sphere of politics. And so,
but what are you sacrificing on the home front is my question. Right.
Well, right. And see, that's the thing. If it's interfering with other things, then obviously we gotta get our priorities straight.
You need to make sure that your home is in order, I guess.
Absolutely.
Is what I'm getting at.
Absolutely.
Right? We need to make sure that our, for lack of a better term, our borders are reinforced.
Absolutely.
And if our borders aren't reinforced, but we're going outside of the borders to try to convince people to join our side,
right,
that doesn't sound productive to me. That sounds risky.
Absolutely.
So I guess that's the big
agree with you
takeaway,
there.
I think, from this conversation is that that's what I mean by the debate with the left is over.
Mhm.
You need to focus on reinforcing your own borders.
Sure.
Before you go out and be a missionary for the conservative cause.
Sure. Absolutely.
I
Well,
think. And I think we
no.
spend, and I guess I'm saying that because I think, and I've been guilty of this too.
Me
I
too.
think we've spent way too much time. Even recently, I've done this. Right.
Mhm.
I think we've spent way too much time trying to be missionaries for our position
Sure.
in commie land
Right.
and upside down land.
Right.
When we should be reinforcing our own borders
For sure.
and making sure that we all have the tools that we need to
Mhm.
be able to engage and protect on our freedoms.
Absolutely.
And I think that so. The next conversation I want to have, and maybe this will be part 3, and then we'll move on to the next philosophical discussion. But I think the next part of the conversation I'd like to have on this is, if the debate is over, which, based off of my definition of what a debate is and what this looks like, I think it is over.
Uh-huh.
What does engagement with the left look like?
Yeah.
Do we just troll them? Right? I mean, seriously.
I mean,
like,
that's fun.
do we just observe them and then talk about what they say with each other? Like, what does that look like? And that's what I'm going to spend
It's
some
good.
time over the next week marinating on.
It's
I
good.
don't know about you, but
Oh, yeah.
I think that's what we want to finish this discussion
Yeah.
on, as far
Sounds good.
as whether or not the debate with the left is over and how do you engage.
Absolutely. So that's it, guys. Sorry, this was a long one. Well, not sorry actually, because we
Sorry, not sorry.
put out a lot of good information,
Right,
and
so.
That's all sourced in the show notes.
Yep. Go to Chronicles.
Go to
CHRONIKLES.org.
So be sure to check us out there. You're going to find a lot of good information. So if you haven't already, like, subscribe, review. 5-star reviews only, please. Our podcast.
We don't accept anything less.
Right. Tell your friends about it. Tell people you love. Tell people you hate. Tell everybody about Canceled Out. Anyway, have a good week. And while we're gone, please don't destroy the culture.
Don't kill the culture, dude.
We'll talk to you guys later.